Chapter 9, Section 4, Quadratic Formula. This is the quadratic equation, so you know how to solve quadratics. Quadratics look like this. To solve, you have learned to graph it. You have learned to use the square roots. You have learned to do completing the square. You have learned how to factor and set them equal to 0 and solve. And today you're going to learn how to do the quadratic formula. You do need to memorize this in Algebra 2. The part under the radical sign of the quadratic formula is called a discriminant. This discriminant indicates how many solutions there will be. So if it's greater than 0, when you simplify it, there are 2 real solutions, 2 x-intercepts. If it's equal to 0, it's 1 real solution, 1 x-intercept. And if it's less than 0, that means there are no real solutions, because remember, that is the part that's under the square root sign, and if it's less than 0, it's a negative, and you can't take a square root of a negative number. You end up with an imaginary number, and there are no real solutions because it doesn't cross the x-axis. Okay, so for determining the number of solutions, we're going to use the part of the quadratic formula that's under the radical sign, b squared minus 4ac. On this one, so it's in the right form. It has to be in this form where x squared plus x plus a constant equal to 0 or equal to y. So then a is 1, b is 8, c is negative 3. So b squared is 8 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 3. 64, negative times negative is a positive 12. 76, that's greater than 0. So there are 2 real solutions. That's all it asked you is how many. It didn't ask you what they were. So 2 real solutions. Reading the directions, this says to actually solve using the quadratic equation. So this time we're going to use the full equation. Negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac, all of that over 2a. I want to see this full equation every time you use it, including right now. So when you insert your picture of your work on your dry erase board, I need to see this full equation. A is equal to 2, b is equal to negative 5, c is equal to 3. Okay, you plug it in and see if you get the right answer. Hit pause and see if you have the right answer. Okay, if you're hitting play, it's because you have, if you're listening to me, it's because you have the right answer. Do you have 1.5 and 1, x equals 1.5 and x equals 1? If you do, you can move on to the next slide. If you do not, let's figure out what's going on. Okay, so negative b, this means the opposite of b. B is negative 5, so the opposite of b is a positive 5. Plus or negative square root b squared is 25 minus 4 times a times c, all of that over 2 times a. Okay, I'm going to start simplifying according to the order of operations. 5 plus or minus square root 25 minus 24, all of that over 4. 5 plus or minus square root of 1, all of that over 4. I know square root of 1 is 1, so 5 plus 1 all over 4, and 5 minus 1, all of that over 4. That plus or minus, we have to separate it now. So 5 plus 1 is 6 over 4. That simplifies to 3 over 2, which simplifies to 1 and 1/2. On the other side, 4 over 4 equals 1. So my answers are x equals 1 and 1/2 and x equals 1. If it tells you to round to the nearest tenth, round to the nearest hundredth, that means you need to round. If it does not tell you to round, you need to leave it in square root form, in simplified square root form. Okay, hit pause and try to do this one. Make sure you start with your formula. Well, you're not going to start with your formula on this one because it's not in the correct format. So you're going to rewrite it in the correct format, and then you're going to write the formula with A, B, C, and then solve it. Hit pause and do all of that now. Okay, do you have 1/2 and 2/3? X equals 1/2 and x equals 2/3. If you do, upload a picture. Make sure your formula is there. If you do not have it, then you need to see what's going on. Okay, so we're going to start with our formula. Negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac, all of that over 2a. A is equal to -6, B is equal to 7, and C is equal to -2. So I should subtract 2 from both sides, and that gets it equal to 0. So now I'm going to plug it in. Negative B, or the opposite of B, is -7, plus or minus square root B squared is 49, minus 4 times -6 times -2. All of that over 2 times -6. All right, this is a negative times a negative times a negative, so I know it's going to be a positive. -7 plus or minus square root 49 plus 6 times 4 is 24. 24 times 2 is 48. Did I say that's going to be a positive? That's going to be a negative. A negative times a negative times a negative is a negative. All of that over a -12. Okay, -7 plus or minus square root 1, all of that over -12. Quite a coincidence that both of those have square root of square root of 1. Just a coincidence. Okay, so now I'm going to break them apart. -7 plus 1, all of that over -12, and -7 minus 1, and all of that over -12. -7 plus 1 is -6 over -12. That is positive 1/2. On the other side, -8 over -12. Divide by, see, I'm going to divide by 4. Divide by 4, that's a negative over negative is a positive. So 8 divided by 4 is 2, 12 divided by 4 is 3. So my answers are x equals 1/2 and x equals 2/3. Okay, why don't you see if you can answer this yourself? Hit pause, do the entire thing, and see if you get the right answer. Okay, did you get there will be about 30 breeding pairs in about 5 years? If you did, insert a picture of all your work and your sentence answer with the appropriate label and the word about, and move on to the next slide. If that's not what you got, let's see what's going on. Okay, so we read the whole thing. We understand what our variables are for. Y is the number of breeding pairs. X is the number of years. They want to know when, so they want you to find X when there are 30 breeding pairs. So that means 30 is my Y because that's my number of breeding pairs. So I just substitute 30 into this equation. And obviously you're going to use quadratic formula, but you're not there yet. You have to set it equal to 0. So we're going to have to subtract 30 from both sides. So we have 0.34x squared plus 3x minus 21 equal to 0. So now I'm ready for my quadratic formula. A equals 0.34, B equals 3, C equals -21, and I always start with my actual formula. So negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac, all of that over 2a. Now I am ready to substitute the opposite of b, -3 plus or minus square root b squared, 9, minus 4 times 0.34 times -21. All of that over 2 times 0.34. When you're using your calculator, make sure you're using calculator for each step, one step at a time. Don't just throw all the numbers in. Your calculator might not do order of operations appropriately, however you type it in. Okay, so I'm going to do this simplification and this simplification at the same time. Negative times a negative is a positive, so -3 plus or minus square root 9. Now I'm going to multiply 4 times 0.34 times 21, and I get, let's see here, it's going to be a plus sign because negative times a negative is positive. 28.56, all of that over 0.68. Now I'm going to simplify this part. -3 plus or minus square root 37.56, all of that over 0.68. At this point, I'm going to break it into two separate expressions. -3 plus square root 37.56, all of that over 0.68, and -3 minus square root 37.56, all of that over 0.68. Okay, I'm going to use my calculator, and I'm going to find what that square root is. They want to know how many years, so I'm going to go out. I always go out at least 2 digits to the right of where I need. So how many years could be either full number of years or maybe a half a year. So I'm going to go out 3 places just because I want to make sure I go out the right number of places. The further you are to the right of the decimal before you round, the more accurate you are. So -3 plus 6.129, all that over 0.68. Using my calculator, I have 4.609 approximately. And then on my other side, -3 minus 6.129, all of that over 0.68. I see right now that that will end up with a negative number, and that doesn't make sense. So I'm going to ignore that negative side because it's not logical anymore. I'm going to come back to my positive side. All right, so how many years? I'm not going to do 4.6 years because the way it's written, it looks more like it needs to be a whole year. So I'm going to say in about 5 years, so I rounded to my nearest whole number, there will be about, so they rounded that as well, 30 breeding pairs, period. And so that's how I got that. And because it's a real world problem, we are going to go ahead and do that square root and end up with decimals. Anytime it says to round or it's a real world problem, go ahead and do it. If it doesn't tell you to round or it's not a real world problem, leave it in simplified square root. And that's it.